85,000 jawans fighting Naxal terrorists, and there are just 800 helmets to share between them. That's the stunning figure unearthed by a Mail Today investigation into the equipment provided to men and women fighting what is supposedly India's biggest threat. Once again, the reason for this is bureaucratic red tape. Here's a special report.
Our braves waging one of the bloodiest wars in India's history without appropriate safety gear. Red tape has ensured that there are only 800 bulletproof helmets for 85,000 jawans deployed to battle Red Terror. The number of sanctioned bulletproof helmets are 50,000 as per highly placed sources. But to make matters worse, the CRPF has only received 20 crores out of 918 crores of central funds sanctioned between 2012 and 2014. Statistics show that bullet and shrapnel injuries to exposed heads of jawans is the biggest cause of death in the red zone.
While the availability of bulletproof helmets, which can withstand shots fired from modern-day assault rifles, is being doubted, that of the much cheaper, lighter, recommended patkas used even by the Indian Army is certainly not. However, by not moving on either of these two proposals, those sitting inside these high offices are certainly not justifying their presence and importance.
Under these circumstances, I consider this neglect to be criminal and culpable on the part of the people who are responsible for these decisions. I think, far from being in government, they should be in jail.
The CRPF has taken up the issue of this killer crunch of safety gear with the Union Home Ministry after the 3rd of March Sukma bloodbath, where 15 jawans were killed in a Naxal ambush. With Abhishek Bhalla and Jugal Purohit, Bureau Report, Headlines Today.
Jugal Purohit, one of the correspondents who got us that report, is with us in the studios for more on this. Jugal, if I can come across to you with the first question. Alarming findings. If sum up for viewers just three of the top findings that we should all be worried about.
Well, Pierre, the first and foremost issue that faces these jawans is basic infrastructure. We're talking about helmets, we're talking about shoes, we're talking about mobile phone connectivity, we're talking about roads. I have visited some of these camps where these jawans are made to stay, and the lines of supply themselves are so thin that it's very difficult. I mean, in several cases, it's the Maoists who are controlling the access to these camps. So whatever food and ration comes to them is actually being controlled by the Maoists. So it's a terribly odd situation that these people are stuck in, and sadly, a bureaucracy which does not understand, does not relate to them, and has the power to decide. But the guys down there have no power whether to abide or not. It's a deadly concoction in which these jawans are today trapped, and unfortunately it does seem by these repeated exposures that we've had that the sensitization that the bureaucracy should be having towards these issues is sadly just not there, Pierre.
I want to go to Mr. Abid Rasool Khan, who's with the Congress party and joins us now from Hyderabad. Mr. Khan, how does the government allow such a situation to come to pass? Mr. Khan, if you can hear me, how does the government allow such a situation to come?
There are two issues in this. One is we are discussing a very serious issue. It is pertaining to the national security and also the morale of our forces who are fighting valiantly. As far as the government is concerned, I would like to say that we have provided for a budget which is a record in itself for modernization of all these forces. Now the question of whether the equipment was provided, and if it is not provided, what is the reason, we definitely need to inquire and take suitable action to see that all the equipment that is required is provided to the jawans. Okay. Now the point here is that most of the casualties in forces are lack of intelligence failure and lack of preemptive actions which are to be taken. Now, when you have looked at the recent instances in Chhattisgarh, it was a matter of the central intelligence not being taken seriously, and the jawans sent out to an operation which otherwise could have been avoided. And likewise, the national one minute, I'll just complete it. Likewise, the national information intelligence grid, which has been planned by the central government, that also has not seen the light of the day because of some resistance from some states. So this is very crucial to protect the
Okay,
life of our valiant
let me
soldiers
take
and
both
jawans.
the points that you mentioned, sir. Let me take both the points that you mentioned. The first was the allocated budget. According to my figures, 918 crore was sanctioned for the CRPF modernization plan over the next 5 years. Only 20 crore has reached the force. And if you do the math, they should have got, by my calculations, 360 crore if you average it out over 5 years. Why has that money not gone to the CRPF from the center?
We have made a provision of about 12,000 crores for all the forces, and it is for the forces to make a requisition and draw the money. As far as the government is concerned, I can assure you there is no dearth of funds, and as a requisition and as a requirement comes, we have been providing those funds to the forces on a first priority basis.
Okay.
Now, why the delay in acquiring the sophisticated equipment? I would like to say on the channel that definitely it requires an inquiry why there was a delay, and the officers who are responsible have to be answerable for such a lapse if it is there.
So the officers have to be responsible and not the government for requisitioning this infrastructure is what you're saying. Mr. Prakash Singh, you're an internal security expert. You fought in the paramilitary forces yourself. What do you make of that comment there?
No, I don't think what he has stated is factually correct. It's not a question of the security forces placing their requisition. The fact of the matter is that the budget which was allocated, a substantial portion of that has been diverted.
And where is
nobody is going to admit that, nobody is going to state that, but considering the very meager and the paltry allotment which has been done against the budgeted allotment, the only explanation is that the rest of the money has been diverted to schemes like food for security and all that which is happening. I mean, considerations of
votes.
Considerations of vote bank, because they are more important than fighting this counterinsurgency.
Mr. Khan, considerations of vote banks more important than fighting what your own Prime Minister and the country's Prime Minister called India's biggest threat?
I really want to, without contravening or without contradicting the submissions of Mr. Prakash Singh, I would like to say that we have not done anything which is vote bank politics as far as the armed forces and the soldiers and the
so why aren't they getting the money that was sanctioned for them?
No, the money, like the procedure for acquiring the equipment, identifying the equipment, what is required and placing the orders lies with the forces and the technical team and the expertise they have in that and the field trials which take place. So it is for them to make a requisition and the budget will be released for that. Now, as far as security is concerned, apart from the security, our government has been working very, very strongly on the reason why this skirmishes happen and why the Naxalism has taken place. And we have an integrated action plan under which we have been successful. Now, between 2009 and 2013, out of the 180 affected districts, it has come down to 60 affected districts.
I'm going to put a few more statistics to you. Mr. Khan,
let me finish it. Only half a minute.
Okay.
The deaths of the jawans and the people has also come down by half. So that shows that there is definitely a concern for all this, and we are trying to take out the root cause and see that it is eradicated.
Okay, I'm going to put a few more statistics to you, but before that, I want to go to Vikram Singh, who's been a former DGP for the state of Uttar Pradesh. Mr. Singh, again, your early comments on what you're hearing from Mr. Khan, that it's about the forces and the force commanders who are not putting these requests through. You've headed a state police force. Is that accurate?
No, it's my painful duty to contradict Mr. Khan. Number one, there are people, emergency situations call for emergency responses. That sense of urgency seems to be lacking in the government and in the officers sitting in the North Block and the South Block. The purchases made, unfortunately, are vendor-driven. And I may recall that Mr. Pranav Sahai, the former DGP of CRPF, have given a wish list or a requisition for portable telephone exchanges, robotic controlled bomb disposal squads, equipment, arms, ammunition, night vision devices, bulletproof jackets and patkas. That is not forthcoming, and people in service perhaps would be reluctant to state that on record. But let me tell you that on the condition of anonymity, they have said that officers, senior officers sitting in the government stall and obstruct purchases. And if there are purchases made, as you very rightly said, of bulletproof jackets, nothing comes cheap. No good bulletproof jacket will come for 850 rupees. You only get flannel jackets for 850 rupees. We are in fact compromising the morale and the security of our forces in the Naxal affected areas.
Mr. Singh, I'm going to come back to you on that. But Jugal, you wanted to jump in with a point as well. You know, one of the statistics that leaps out at me is if you look at the ratio of terrorists to security forces killed in Jammu and Kashmir, for example, it's 1:6. You know, one security force for every 6 terrorists that we kill. In Naxal affected states, it's 1:1. Isn't that because of poor equipment?
It's unfortunately not as simple as that, Pierre. What is happening is that it's high time actually the nation understands, you know, that what we are fighting in these areas is much more severe, is much more serious than what we are fighting now in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
After so many years of the army and the air force, everyone doing their bit, situation has stabilized, but not out here. And the point that I would like to make, and maybe put it to our representative from the UPA, is that is he even aware that the kind of morale that the CRPF and the other forces are under? They are actually fighting against the government in the Delhi High Court, seeking issues like pay and upgradations on that. Recently, there were several spate of incidents, you know, where the Maoists used to actually bury landmines and blow up vehicles. It did not occur to the bureaucracy and the top brass to actually try and improve those vehicles.
Yeah.
What they instead did is that, okay, then our jawans will walk. And today, believe me, our jawans are made to walk for 30, 35, 40 kilometers a day just because we cannot improvise, just because we cannot innovate. So that's the situation. Yeah. And you know, it's a situation where the bureaucracy is actually ruling the roost, and the politicians are absolutely blissfully unaware.
Mr. Khan, I want to come, you know, on the points that Jugal is making, and it's a point that Mr. Ajay Sani made in that story that we ran earlier. There's criminal and culpable negligence in his words, and the people who are responsible for this should go to jail. That's what an internal security expert is saying. You've said there should be an investigation against the people in your own government. Is that something you will now back? People who are responsible for this should go to jail? Mr. Khan, the investigation you called for could result in people from your government going to jail.
Your audio is not clear. I could not get your question. Can you please repeat it?
I'll repeat it, sir. The investigation that you have called for against your own government could have people going into jail. That's something that you believe should happen.
Yeah, as I told you before, that we are committed for modernization. We are committed to see that the moral of the forces is at the highest.
I asked you if people from the government, not bureaucrats, the political leaders should be going to jail for these decisions not being followed up on.
No, actually, there is some problem with your audio. I'm not able to get your questions. But if your question is about the people in the government who has been responsible for this, I would like to say that the government and the Home Ministry is totally committed for this, and they have made the provisions. Now, as far as the equipment being purchased, that is for the forces to make an indent and an order and get it purchased. It is, and the Home Ministry has never delayed these purchases. Now, secondly, the moral what we are talking about on the channel, I would like to assure you that the moral of our forces is definitely very high, and it was
Have
not
you
right
visited
on our
these
part
forces,
to say
Mr.
that
Khan? Have you visited these forces? Because our reporter has, and he has a very contradictory point.
No, basically we always interact with the forces.
Have you met any of these forces to say that their morale is high?
But as far as I know, all the forces, starting from the army to the CRPF and all, they are committed for the security of the country, and their moral is very high. Okay, the equipment part, I am also for it. That the equipment should be the most modern, and we should.
It's never been about the commitment of these forces and the men who are part of these.
Committed to that.
Mr. Khan, no, as Jugal was saying, no one's questioning the commitment of the forces, but Mr. Singh has something to say about that.
You see, the forces are committed, but the point is they do not have the necessary infrastructure and the equipment, and the shortages are basically in respect of housing. You see, I mean, when I talk of housing, I mean prefabricated huts which could be constructed in the remote areas, which are not there. You have thrown them out of schools because the Supreme Court didn't want them there. No, and you have not raised any construction, temporary or permanent. So housing is one. Then road building, the progress in road building is pathetic. And wherever regular roads have come up, the IED incidents have gone down. So why not have this? And thirdly, mobile towers, about 2,000 towers or perhaps more than that have to come up in the LWE affected areas. Those towers are not being erected. there's bureaucratic delay in that, and then the equipment, the helmets and other things, that's another matter.
Mr. Vikram Singh over in Lucknow, we're running short of time, but if you can also put your point in about this commitment of the forces that Mr. Khan is talking about, do you buy that at all?
Not at all. Let us not sweep the problem underneath the carpet. I am for the morale, but look at the number of suicides, look at the rate of attrition. If that is anything indicative about the prevailing situation of the morale, well, the problem is very acute and it has to be addressed immediately. And in fact, I totally agree with Mr. Ajay Sahani that in fact any purchase that have to be made will have to be made promptly and in a time-bound manner. And if that is not made, somebody will have to be held responsible for that.
And I want to put one very quick question to Mr. Khan. If this investigation that you have called for leads up right to the Home Minister, Sushil Kumar Shinde, should he be in jail?
Mario, I have very poor audio here. I really can't get your questions. Can you repeat it if you don't mind?
I wish I could. I'm being told by my producer that we've flat run out of time, but
I'm sorry, your audio in the studio is not proper.
And I apologize for that, but we're out of time, sir. I want to thank our guests for coming in today. Jugal, thank you also, Mr. Prakash Singh, Mr. Vikram Singh in Lucknow, and Mr. Khan over in Hyderabad. Thank you for coming on the show.